Hello everybody, today's video covers lesson 7-2, which covers congruence and congruent statements. Your assignment was on page 525, numbers 1 through 4. Now with these congruent statements, it's very important to know the notation to use for each of these questions. So let's go over basic notation. For angle measures, if we're referring to a certain angle, typically we use an angle sign like this to help denote that it's an angle. So for example, if I'm wanting to say angle M, I would say angle M, just like that. That's how I would put angle. And then if I'm saying it's congruent to something, I'm going to have an equal sign, and then I'm going to have like a little squiggly line above it. Okay, so that's kind of hard to see, but it looks something like this, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but that signifies that it is congruent. So, for example, here, maybe I say angle M is congruent to angle R. Okay, so that's how I would signify if two angles were congruent. If I'm talking about a line segment, what I have to use is the 2 points that make up the segment. So, for example, maybe I want segment, right, say I have a line here, and this line is made up by points A and B. So I would say line AB, right, and maybe it's congruent to another line down here, CD, right, and that's how I would denote that the 2 line segments were congruent. So line segment AB is congruent to line segment CD. Now it's important to notice here that order matters in the sense that whatever point comes first, that refers to the point in the second shape, right? So for the example on this line segment, point A will refer to point C, okay? So it's important to note that they need to be in order, okay? And then vice versa, point B refers to point D, that those two are congruent. Because when you start getting into very specific cases, maybe you're talking about a triangle, right? Maybe we're comparing 2 triangles, right? If I were to draw 2 triangles, right, A, B, and C, and then over here I had another triangle, D, E, and F, it's important to note that a triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. It's important to note that those points have to be in order, right? So for example, I'm not saying that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle FED. The reason it doesn't work that way is because the angles won't match up, the line segments won't match up, right? So we want to make sure we are labeling our parts according to what is congruent to each other. Okay, so let's get into the assignment, numbers 1 through 4. Numbers 1 and 2, we have to write congruent statements comparing the corresponding parts in each of the set of congruent figures. So we're dealing with triangles. Think about a triangle. There are 3 sets of angles and 3 sets of line segments. So you're going to have 6 total congruent statements here. Now, these lines signify what is congruent to what. So let's start with angles. With the angles, if you have these kind of these half circle looking things, whatever the number of half circles are, those are corresponding to each other, right? So for example, on number 1, the half circle on N and the half circle on S there's only one semicircle there. So we would say angle N is congruent to angle S, right? Because they both have one half circle. Angle M, notice, has 2 half circles. So which one has 2? Well, that would be angle T and the other one. So angle M is congruent to angle T. And my last angle, angle O, is congruent to angle V. Right? And it's important to denote that those 3, right, are congruent to each other. Right? We don't want to mess that up. And now if we look at the line segments, right, let's look at our first line segment, NO. Now there's a couple different things we need to look at. One, line segment NO has one dash mark on it. Okay, so line segment NO is going to be congruent to, and now I have to figure out what other segment has one dash mark. Well, that has to be this one here. However, I need to make sure that I put them in order, right? Since I went from N to O, right, one half circle to two half circles, or sorry, three half circles, then I need to do the same thing on my second triangle, one half circle to three half circles. So this one's going to be from S to V, right? So that, I know that's kind of confusing in a sense, but we're just trying to make sure they're in order, okay? And I would keep going, okay? And so now let's go to the two dash mark. So if I go from N to M, one half circle to two, so NM is going to be congruent to, now my two dash mark, one half circle to two, so that's going to be congruent to ST, okay? Because N is referring to S and M is referring to T. And then my last one, if I go from M to O, right, three hash marks, then I need to go from two half circles to three. So this one would be from T to V. So line segment MO is congruent to line segment TV. Okay? So I hope that kind of makes sense on numbers 1, and then you can apply that to number 2. With number 3, we have a parallelogram, two parallelograms, and we have to write congruent statements comparing the corresponding parts. Now you can do that. You can do that based on what we just did on 1 and 2. But I'm going to help you out with the transformation part. Then determine which transformation map parallelogram UVWX to parallelogram HJIK. Okay? So, how do I get from UVWX to HJIK? That's what we're wanting to know. Okay? So, to get to this parallelogram right here is going to have to be reflected over the x-axis and then translated, right? And once it's reflected, it's going to look something like this. And then I can translate it 1 unit to the right, right? So it is reflected over the x-axis and translated 1 unit to the right. Okay, and that would be my transformation statement. Now you need to go back and write the corresponding parts, the comparing. Okay, so that's what you need to do for number 3. With number 4, you have to figure out the angle measures. So triangle JLK, so this triangle here, is congruent to NLM. Now it's important to note that, remember, J is going to correspond to N, L is going to correspond to L, and K is going to correspond to M. Right? So we can think about this as this triangle is just going to be rotated this way, right? It's congruent, it's going to rotate all the way around, and then those two are going to line up. So J goes with N, and K goes with M. So if the measure of angle JKL, so JKL, if I write this out, JKL, the middle angle is what we're looking for here. So JKL is this angle right here. So K is the actual angle we're looking at. Then the measure of NML, remember, since those are congruent, that also has to be 66 degrees. Okay? And if MN is 15 inches, so MN is 15 inches, and KJ also has to be 15 inches. because they are congruent triangles. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. With these congruent statements with the corresponding parts, it gets confusing figuring out which angle maps to another angle, right? We're trying to figure out which angles are the same and which line segments are the same. Okay, so remember, if you have questions, please feel free to email me, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. I hope you have a great day, and thanks for watching.